All right, so today we are going to talk about something known as our production possibilities curve. Sometimes it's also known as the production possibilities frontier. Now, very important because this is our first graph in econ, right? And FYI, there's about 3 or 4 questions based on this on your test, so you absolutely have to know about this concept. Now, the very first thing is that a PPC curve compares always 2 items. In this case, we have belts and we have shoes, right? So PPC curve always compares 2 items. Now, the way that they're being compared is the production possibilities of making these 2 items. As you see at point A, we can make 30 belts, but when we make 30 belts, we can't make any shoes. At point B, when we make 25 belts, we can make 5 shoes. At point C, when we make 20 belts, we can make 10 shoes. And at point D, when we make 15 belts, we can make 15 shoes. So once again, as you go, what do you notice about this? As you decrease one item, the other item you're making more of. But the way that this works is, in order to produce more of one item, you have to give up some of the other item. And that is going to be known as our opportunity cost. Remember what opportunity cost means. Opportunity cost is the next best alternative given up when you make a choice or a decision, right? So now let's go ahead and get to the fun part. Let's go ahead and graph. All of our graphs are L-shaped in econ. So I have my L drawn, right? Now on either the y-axis or the x-axis, belts has to go on one of those. Let's just say I'm going to put it on the x-axis. So the x-axis will represent belts. That means that the y-axis has to be shoes. So we have our y-axis and x-axis both labeled. So let's go ahead and get to our variables. All right, so let's start with shoes. The lowest number of shoes is 0. The highest number is 15. And they're counting by increments of 5. So I'm going to do the same. So I'm going to come here and write 5, 10, 15. Now, this is the origin, right? In math, that represents 0, 0. So this is where my 0 is. I just didn't label it because it's understood, right? Now, let's go ahead and do the same for belts. My lowest number is 15. Highest number is 30. So what I'm going to do is I am going to count by 5s, right? So I am going to start here at, let's see, I'm going to start here. This is going to be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and that's all I need, right? 15 to 30. Now let's go ahead and plot these points. So for point A, if we look at point A, remember how many belts? 30 belts. How many shoes? 0 shoes. So our point is going to be right here, and we're going to label that point A. Now let's go ahead and do point B. 25 belts, which is here, and 5 shoes. So I'm going to come across where 5 is. 25 is right there. So my point is going to be about right there. And I'm going to label that point B. Now I'm going to do the same for C. At point C, there's 20 belts and 10 shoes. So my point is going to be about right here. And I'm going to label that point C. Now the last one is 15 belts and 15 shoes. So 15, and 15 is about right here. Put my point, I'm going to call that point D. Now I'm going to draw and play a game of connect the dots. Now, every point, this is very important, every point that is on this line represents, and go ahead and write this down, efficiency. That is a good thing. All businesses strive to produce at one of those points. So efficiency, that's represented by points A, B, C, and D. Now, very important, none of these points are more productive than the other. They're all productive. Anything on this line here, even if we had little bitty points right here, we'll make little bitty points. Anything on this line is a good thing. It's efficient. It's an efficient use of resources. Businesses want to produce at that point. Now, let's just suppose this business decided to make 5 pairs of shoes and 10 belts, and they were producing right here. And we'll call that point E. If they were producing at point E, this point right here, this would be inefficient. And go ahead and write this in your notes. Inefficient. 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 Now, it's inefficient because it's located inside of the curve, right? Anything inside. If we had a point at 10.5, that would be inefficient. 5.15, that would be inefficient. Anything inside of the curve is inefficient, right? Very important that you know that. Now, suppose that this company wanted to produce at 15 shoes and 30 belts. That will put the point outside of the curve, which is about right here, and we're going to label that point F. Now, the thing you need to know about point F, and any point that would be located outside of this particular line or curve, this is an impossible point of production. They cannot produce here, not yet. This is impossible, or sometimes you'll see unattainable. Unattainable. So those are the 3 positions that you can be on the production possibilities curve in terms of on our graph. So if a company is producing inside of the curve, anything inside, that is inefficient. If the company is producing on the curve or on the line, that is a good thing. That is efficiency. Those points are efficient points. And finally, the 3rd position is outside of the curve. Anywhere outside of the curve is an impossible point of production. They cannot produce at that point yet. However, it's their goal to be able to do so. Now, very, 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 very important part of this. I'm going to ask you a few questions here. So, suppose this company was producing at point A. So they are switching from point A, that's where they used to produce, and now they are going to start producing at point D. At point D. What is the opportunity cost in doing so? What is the opportunity cost in doing so? Now, you're going to have to do this on a test, so make sure that you focus. I'm going to put this camera down a little bit so we can see a little bit clearer. All right, so this company was producing here at point A. Remember, at point A, they're producing 30 belts and 0 shoes, right? So 30 belts, 0 shoes. Now they're switching production to point D, and they're going to start producing 15 belts and 15 shoes. Remember, what does the word opportunity cost or the phrase opportunity cost mean? It means what you gave up in a decision, right? Your next best alternative. So the next best alternative was point A, right? So they're switching to point D, but they gave up point A. So at point A, if we go from point A to point D, the good thing is they weren't able to produce any shoes at point A. Now they're able to produce 15 shoes. But the opportunity cost in that, what did they have to give up to be able to do that? So the answer is they went from 30 belts to 15 belts, right? They're producing more shoes, but they gave up how many belts? They gave up 15 belts. That is their opportunity cost. That's what they gave up to produce more of the other item, right? So 15 belts is our opportunity cost. All right, let's do another one. Suppose that they are going to go from point C to producing now at point B. So from B to C, what's the opportunity cost in going from producing at point C to point B? Let me pull this up a little bit so we can see. All right, so at point C, they were producing 20 belts and 10 shoes. At point B, they are producing 30 belts and 0 shoes. So they're able to produce more belts. But what did they have to give up of the other item, right? So going from point C to point B. Oh, excuse me, I looked at the wrong one. So point C, going from point C at 20 belts, 10 shoes, right? To point B, 25 belts and 5 shoes. So they're going from C to B. So C to B, they're gaining belts, but what did they have to give up? They had to give up shoes. How many shoes did they have to give up? They had to give up 5 shoes. 5 shoes. So that is the opportunity cost. That is the opportunity cost. So very, 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 very interesting. And you can do this if you look at this as well up here. Suppose they went from D to A. What is the opportunity cost? So at D, they're making 15 of both, but at A, they're making 30 belts and 0 shoes. So they're making more belts, but what did they have to give up? They had to give up shoes, right? They had to give up 15 shoes. If they're going from B to D, they were producing 25 belts. Now they're producing 15 belts. So they had to give up 10 belts in order to make more shoes, right? So you're looking for, what did the company have to give up to make more of the other item? So the opportunity cost is always going to be what they had to give up. So you have to figure out that number, right? So let's suppose that this company makes some investments. Remember, we talked about investments yesterday. Investments in capital, resources, equipment, and technology, as well as education, right? They send some of their workers to training, they buy some new machinery, and it helps them. Let's suppose it helps them in this way. Let's say that instead of producing 30 belts, they can now produce 40. Instead of 25, they can now produce 30. Instead of 20 at point C, they now can produce 25. And at point D, instead of 15, they can now produce 20. Shoes, they weren't able to produce any whenever they were solely making belts. But let's suppose that now they're able to make 2. Instead of 5 at point B, they're able to make 10. At point C, they're able to make 15, and at point B, they're able to make 20. So when we graph these out, so I only have 30 here, so imagine 40 being here. 40 and 2, that is about right here, right? So that would be my new point A. 30 and 10, that puts me at about right here. And I know I have words in the way here, but we're going to work through that. And for point C, 25 belts, 15 shoes, 25 belts, 15 shoes, that's about up here. That's my point. And then the last point is 20 and 20. So 20 belts, and let's add 20 over here, 20 shoes. So we're talking about up here. Now if we make our line here, what just happened? That impossible point that we couldn't reach earlier, that we could not produce at, now we are able to produce at that point. Why? This is what's known as economic growth. Whenever the curve or the line shifts outward, notice it shifted outward. That is due to an increase in resources, productive resources. We were able to have more human resources. We may have hired more workers. We were able to buy more machinery, more technology, and more investments in education, increasing human capital, right? Now, so you need to know that for the test. Increase of resources is always going to result in an outward shift. Now, what would happen if we had a natural disaster and the United States resources dried up? The resource well dried up. Instead of having 40 here or 30, we might have 20, right? And instead of 30 or 25, it might be 20. This might be 15. This might be 10. So you get the point. You have less resources. The numbers are going to decrease. Our numbers might be over here now, right? And then our curve would have shifted inward. So the point that I'm trying to make to you is an inward shift is a result of a reduction of resources. So this is what you'll see. Matter of fact, this is what's going on right now with coronavirus, with our production, right? Production possibilities curve. Our production in this country has decreased because of coronavirus. You have people being laid off, businesses not making the same amount of stuff, they're not using the same amount of resources, they're not employing their resources in an effective, efficient way. So we are on an inward shift right now. All right, so I hope that helped you with the production possibilities curve, and until next time, peace.